The desert night was silent until a gunshot split the air, echoing through the empty streets. Dust swirled in the pale moonlight as Thomas Granger gripped his revolver but kept it holstered, his heart pounding. He had sworn never to draw again, yet the sound awakened old memories of blood and betrayal. His boots scuffed against the wooden porch as he leaned on the post, staring into the distance. "Samuel Price?" A boy barely 20 whispered. "Did you hear that, Thomas?" Thomas Granger said, "Stay inside, Samuel. The desert sometimes spits out ghosts." The saloon's lanterns flickered, and old Jedediah Cole, the retired gunslinger, muttered, "That wasn't no ghost. Trouble's riding this way." A shadow stretched across the dirt road, longer than the figure that cast it. Martha Langley, veiled in silk and secrets, stepped out from the saloon doorway, her eyes glinting. Martha Langley said, "It begins again, doesn't it?" Thomas Granger's jaw tightened, his vow pressing against his chest like chains. He whispered more to himself than the others, "I swore I'd never draw again. Until the devil himself comes wearing the law." The wind carried the scent of dust and whiskey as the saloon's piano stilled mid-note. Thomas Granger stepped from the porch into the center of the street, boots crunching on grit. Samuel Price followed cautiously, clutching his rifle. Jedediah Cole stayed behind, muttering curses to the night, while Martha Langley leaned against the doorway, eyes fixed on the road. Thomas Granger said, "It's been quiet too long. Quiet like this only comes before storms." Samuel Price whispered, "Is it him?" Thomas Granger's silence was answer enough. The desert stretched endlessly beyond town, and with every heartbeat, the night grew heavier. The silence broke again, this time not with a gunshot, but with the distant thud of hooves. Thomas Granger froze, listening. Wall. Samuel Price whispered, "One rider." Jedediah Cole said, "One is all it takes." Martha Langley's gaze sharpened as she said, "He comes dressed in law, but law means nothing when worn by the devil." Thomas Granger closed his eyes briefly, the vow burning in his memory. He said, "If it is him, then I'll have no choice." The rider grew closer, the faint glint of a badge catching moonlight as the horse neared town. Thomas Granger felt the weight of years press down on him. "I'm Denwishay." Samuel Price whispered, "He wears the star." Martha Langley's voice was bitter. "Stars can shine on devils too." Jedediah Cole muttered, "If that's who I think it is, Thomas, you'll need to break your vow." Thomas Granger clenched his jaw, every breath laced with dread. The horse slowed, hooves striking wood and dirt as the rider entered the main street. His face emerged from shadow, sharp features carved with cruelty. The star gleamed on his vest, but his eyes burned with something darker. Thomas Granger whispered, "The devil wears the law now." Samuel Price trembled, unable to lift his rifle. Martha Langley turned away, as if she had seen this before. Jedediah Cole's hand tightened on his cane, his voice low. "It begins tonight." The night seemed to hold its breath as the outlaw's vow neared its breaking point. The dawn broke with red light spilling across the desert horizon, but the town felt no warmth. Thomas Granger sat on a bench outside the saloon, staring at the ground as if the dust carried the faces of his past. Samuel Price lingered near him, nervously clutching his rifle, unsure whether to speak. Jedediah Cole leaned against the post, his cane tapping the wood with restless rhythm. Martha Langley stepped out quietly, her gaze lingering on Thomas Granger with unreadable intent. Samuel Price said, "Thomas, why did you put the gun away if trouble keeps coming?" Thomas Granger's voice carried the weight of years, "Because every time I drew, someone never stood up again." Jedediah Cole muttered, "That badge rider will not give you peace, Thomas." Martha Langley's lips curved faintly as she said, "Peace has no place in this town anymore." The sound of distant crows broke the silence, as if the desert itself mocked their unease. The town began to stir, though unease clung to every face. A merchant pulled shutters closed instead of opening them. Horses pawed nervously at the posts. Thomas Granger rose slowly, scanning the horizon as though expecting fire. Samuel Price said. If you face him, will you kill him? Thomas Granger turned sharply, his eyes filled with ghosts. Every shot leaves a mark on more than flesh. Martha Langley stepped closer, her voice hushed. But you swore. Until the devil wore the star. He wears it now. Jedediah Cole coughed harshly, his voice raw. A vow has its time, and that time has come, Thomas. The words fell heavy as the sheriff's badge glinted faintly on the rider still tied to the post. Inside the saloon, silence reigned, though the piano keys gleamed in waiting. Thomas Granger pushed through the swinging doors, followed by Samuel Price with wide eyes. Jedediah Cole limped in behind them, while Martha Langley drifted to the bar with calm grace. Thomas Granger said, "Whiskey. No talk." Samuel Price whispered, "Thomas, you can't ignore this." Thomas Granger's hand trembled as he lifted the glass, whiskey sloshing. Jedediah Cole muttered, "The devil never comes for talk, only blood." Martha Langley's tone was smooth yet sharp, and sometimes blood is the only bargain. The saloon keeper stayed hidden, unwilling to witness what fate demanded. Shadows stretched across the floorboards, marking the slow crawl of destiny. The whiskey burned, but gave Thomas Granger no peace. He closed his eyes, recalling the night he swore the vow, the grave of his brother beneath desert stone. Samuel Price said quietly, "You were a legend once, Thomas." Thomas Granger answered, "Legends bury more than they save." Jedediah Cole raised his voice, sharp despite age. "You put down your gun when you should have ended him. Now he wears the law." Martha Langley tilted her head, her eyes piercing. "Perhaps you need to decide if redemption lies in silence or in fire." The saloon's lantern flickered violently, shadows rippling like demons on the wall. The saloon doors creaked open as the rider stepped inside, spurs clinking against the wood. The sheriff's star glinted in the lamplight, though the eyes behind it carried only cold fire. Thomas Granger stiffened, hand frozen near the glass. Samuel Price gripped the rifle but dared not raise it. Jedediah Cole muttered like a curse, "The devil has found his law." Martha Langley's smile flickered briefly before fading into silence. The rider scanned the room slowly, his gaze settling on Thomas Granger with deadly recognition. The vow pressed on Thomas Granger's soul like a blade, demanding to be broken. The air thickened, and time seemed to stall in that shadowed room. The sheriff's presence spread like poison, seeping into every corner of the saloon. Thomas Granger's hand hovered near his glass, though his heart thundered for the revolver he swore never to touch. Samuel Price's eyes darted nervously, sweat shining on his brow as he whispered, "Thomas, he's staring at you." Jedediah Cole coughed, his voice gravelly, "The devil don't look away, boy." Martha Langley's gaze swept between the two men, her voice cold. "Law or no law, that man came here for you." The sheriff's eyes glowed with silent challenge, the star on his chest reflecting lantern light like fire. The room held its breath, as if time feared the moment to come. The sheriff stepped further into the saloon, spurs biting into the wood with every slow stride. His sneer spread like a cut across his face. Thomas Granger said nothing, though his silence was louder than words. Samuel Price whispered, "Why won't you speak?" Jedediah Cole muttered darkly, "Because the past speaks for him." Martha Langley tilted her head, her smile faint and cruel. Sometimes silence is louder than any bullet. The sheriff finally spoke, his voice deep and cutting. "Thomas Granger, you swore never to draw again. Tonight, I'll see if you keep your word." The tension thickened as the sheriff's shadow swallowed the room. Thomas Granger finally looked up, his eyes cold, his voice heavy. "Some devils wear stars, but they're devils still." Samuel Price flinched at the words, whispering, "You know him." Jedediah Cole struck his cane hard against the floor, shouting, "He knows him too well, boy." Martha Langley leaned closer, her tone soft but dangerous. "Then it's a reckoning written in blood." The sheriff smirked, tilting his head. "You left me alive once, Thomas. A mistake you'll regret." The whiskey glass trembled in Thomas Granger's hand, and the vow gnawed at him like fire. The saloon doors creaked with the wind outside, yet no one moved. Samuel Price whispered, "What does he want from you?" Thomas Granger's voice was low and steady. "He wants me to break my word." Jedediah Cole snarled, "Better a broken word than a grave." Martha Langley's tone sharpened, "Or perhaps both if you hesitate." The sheriff's eyes glimmered with malice. "You'll draw for me, Thomas, or I'll carve this town into dust until you do." The townsfolk outside hushed, listening, while fear crept through the wooden walls like smoke. The sheriff placed his hand on his holster, fingers curling with deliberate slowness. The star on his chest gleamed brighter, as if mocking the lantern light. Thomas Granger's breath steadied, though his eyes betrayed old scars. Samuel Price said, "Thomas, don't." Jedediah Cole growled, "Hell tear this town apart if you don't." Martha Langley whispered with a strange calm, "Maybe the vow was never meant to be kept." The sheriff's voice cut through the silence. "Tonight, the devil and the outlaw decide who owns this town." The floorboards groaned as if bearing witness to destiny's weight. The sheriff's smile widened, his badge flashing with cruel light as if mocking the room itself. Thomas Granger's chest tightened, breath slow, steady, heavy with memory. Samuel Price whispered, "Thomas, he looks at you like prey." Jedediah Cole's voice cracked, "Because he knows the past you buried." Martha Langley's tone was sharper, "And the past just walked in wearing a star." The sheriff leaned forward, his words dripping poison. "You remember the fire, don't you, Thomas? The screams, that was me." The glass shattered in Thomas Granger's hand, whiskey running across the bar like spilled blood. The vow in his heart trembled, every nerve screaming at him to rise. The sheriff's voice carried like a whip, "You left me breathing in the dust years ago, Thomas. That mercy was your curse." Thomas Granger's jaw clenched, words forced through his teeth. "I should have finished it." Samuel Price's whisper trembled, "He burned them, didn't he? Your kin?" Jedediah Cole slammed his cane into the floor, roaring, "The devil wears that star, and the town will bleed for it." Martha Langley's gaze lingered on the sheriff, her tone bitter, "And yet the law bows to him." The sheriff sneered, "Law bends to fear, fear bends to me." The room seemed to darken, as if the walls themselves recoiled. The sheriff leaned closer, his words cutting through silence. "Your brother begged before the flames took him. You watched it in your nightmares, didn't you, Thomas?" Thomas Granger's knuckles whitened, rage fighting the vow within. Samuel Price gasped, his voice broken, "He killed your blood?" Jedediah Cole growled, "The devil grins because he knows the wound he left." Martha Langley's expression faltered, her voice soft but edged, "And still you sit there chained by your vow." The sheriff's laugh echoed like iron chains. "One more grave, and you'll break it. I'll see to that." The saloon's silence turned suffocating, choking every breath. Thomas Granger rose slowly, every motion deliberate, his shadow stretching across the saloon. Samuel Price whispered fearfully, "Thomas, don't." Jedediah Cole muttered, "The vow was broken the moment he walked in." Martha Langley's voice dripped with sharp certainty, "The devil claimed your silence already." The sheriff smirked, tapping the badge with one finger. "This star is mine. Just like this town, you'll kneel or burn." Thomas Granger's voice was steel. "No man owns the souls of the dead, not even the devil in a star." The lantern above flickered violently, shadows writhing like restless spirits. The sheriff's laugh rumbled low, cruel, endless. "Draw for me, Thomas, or I'll make this town a graveyard." Samuel Price backed away, trembling. "He'll kill us all." Jedediah Cole's eyes hardened, his voice breaking with fury. "Better a gun in your hand than chains on our necks." Martha Langley's whisper slithered, "End him, Thomas, before he ends you." Thomas Granger's voice was steady. "Haunted, I swore I'd never draw again, but a vow to the living dies when the devil wears the law." His hand hovered near the revolver, the vow cracking like a storm. The room pulsed with dread, the duel beginning before a bullet was fired. The sheriff's voice echoed, venom dripping from every word. "Your silence killed more than your bullets ever did, Thomas." Thomas Granger's fists shook as the room froze around him. Samuel Price whispered in disbelief. What does he mean? Jedediah Cole's eyes narrowed, his tone sharp. He's twisting the knife, boy. Martha Langley's gaze wavered, her lips pressed tight. The sheriff smirked. Ask her. Thomas. Ask Martha what bed she's warmed these years. Thomas Granger turned slowly, his eyes burning toward Martha Langley. She inhaled sharply, but said nothing. Samuel Price stammered. Martha, tell him it isn't true. The silence was heavier than bullets. Martha Langley's eyes glistened as she whispered, I never wanted you to know, Thomas. Thomas Granger's voice cut like a blade. You sided with him? Samuel Price stepped back, stunned. Martha, why? Jedediah Cole spat bitterly. The devil never walks alone. The sheriff laughed, raising his chin proudly. She chose survival. She chose me. Martha Langley's voice trembled. He owns everything here, Thomas. If I fought him, I'd be ash like the rest. Thomas Granger's chest heaved, his vow now chained with betrayal as heavy as grief. Silence swallowed the saloon again, broken only by the sheriff's cruel chuckle. The sheriff's voice carried across the saloon like a curse. You see, Thomas. Even those closest to you bow to me. Thomas Granger's hand hovered over his holster, trembling with rage. Samuel Price said, She betrayed you for him? Jedediah Cole slammed his cane, his voice booming. A vow means nothing if the devil owns your world. Martha Langley's voice cracked. I never loved him, but I feared him more than death. The sheriff smirked, stepping closer. She belongs to me now, as you should have long ago. Thomas Granger whispered, heavy with fury. I'll never belong to the likes of you. The sheriff's hand tapped the star on his chest, his voice taunting. Your vow made you weak. Your silence made me strong. Thomas Granger's breath steadied, his heart hammering against his ribs. Samuel Price said, Don't listen, Thomas. He wants you broken. Jedediah Cole shouted, You either stand now, or you'll die kneeling. Martha Langley whispered with tears, He'll destroy everyone if you don't stop him. The sheriff grinned, Then draw Thomas, and let this town see your promise burn. Thomas Granger's hand brushed his revolver, the vow in his soul cracking like glass beneath his rage. The sheriff stepped back into the center of the saloon, his voice carrying like thunder. Tonight, the vow dies. Thomas Granger rose to his feet, revolver finally resting in his hand, heavy with justice long denied. Samuel Price gasped, Thomas, you swore. Jedediah Cole's voice shook. He swore until the devil wore the law, and here he stands. Martha Langley pressed her hand to her chest, whispering through tears, Forgive me, Thomas. The sheriff grinned, eyes blazing with hunger. At last, the outlaw returns. Thomas Granger's voice was steady, deadly. No, the reckoning returns. The air snapped taut, the storm unleashed. The saloon doors swung open as the crowd outside pressed inward, their whispers silenced by dread. Thomas Granger stood tall, revolver in hand, his vow shattered like broken glass. Samuel Price whispered, Thomas, it's now or never. Jedediah Cole's cane struck the floor, his voice steady. This is the hour you were born for. Martha Langley trembled, torn between guilt and hope, whispering, End this before it consumes us all. The sheriff's laugh echoed, cruel and thunderous. Finally, the outlaw wakes. Thomas Granger's voice rang out, This ends tonight, devil. Every eye fixed on them, the town holding its breath as the duel began to take form. The sheriff stepped into the center of the room, spurs biting wood with each stride, his hand resting easy on his holster. Thomas Granger matched his steps, each movement deliberate, eyes locked on the man who had stolen his life. Samuel Price whispered in terror, You can't outdraw him. Jedediah Cole growled, This ain't about speed, it's about will. Martha Langley's voice cracked, One shot will decide us all. The sheriff sneered, You should have killed me years ago, Thomas. Thomas Granger's voice was cold as steel. And tonight I finish what should have been done. The sheriff's voice slithered, Your brother's scream still lingers, Thomas. Thomas Granger's eyes narrowed, fury and grief colliding like storm clouds. Samuel Price gasped, He killed your brother? Jedediah Cole barked, the devil's proud of his fire. Martha Langley whispered, "Don't let his poison break you." The sheriff tapped the badge, laughing, "This star burns brighter than your vow." Thomas Granger lifted his revolver, his voice a blade, "This star dies with you." The room shuddered under the weight of their words, lantern light flickering as if the flames themselves feared the coming fire. The silence cracked as the sheriff drew with lightning speed, steel flashing under lantern light. Thomas Granger's hand moved with grim certainty, years of buried skill flooding back. The crowd outside gasped, holding back screams. Samuel Price shouted, "Thomas." Jedediah Cole roared, "Take him down." Martha Langley covered her mouth, trembling. "God help us all." Bullets ripped through the smoky air, wood splintering, glass shattering, as both men fired with fury and fate. The air filled with thunder, time slowing to the heartbeat of death itself. Smoke choked the saloon, the smell of gunpowder heavy in the air. The sheriff staggered, clutching his chest where the star once gleamed. His sneer faded into a twisted grimace. Thomas Granger stood steady, revolver lowered, his vow shattered but his soul burning with justice. Samuel Price whispered, "You did it." Jedediah Cole's voice carried pride and sorrow. "The devil's reign is done." Martha Langley's tears fell, her voice trembling. "But at what cost, Thomas?" Thomas Granger's eyes were hollow, his voice heavy. "The cost was mine to pay." The crowd outside erupted, the town trembling at the birth of legend. The sheriff's body hit the floorboards with a final thud, his star falling from his chest, clinking against the wood. Thomas Granger stood still, revolver lowered, his breath steady, but eyes hollow. Samuel Price whispered in awe, "It's over, Thomas." Jedediah Cole shook his head, his voice heavy. "No, boy, it's only beginning." Martha Langley pressed trembling fingers to her lips, whispering, "The devil's gone, but the scars remain." The saloon crowd stepped cautiously forward, their fear slowly giving way to stunned relief. Thomas Granger muttered, "The vow was broken, and there's no putting it back." The lantern light swayed, painting the room in shadows of loss and survival. The townsfolk began to murmur, relief laced with fear, as though the sheriff's ghost lingered. Samuel Price said, "You saved us, Thomas." Thomas Granger's jaw tightened. No one saved, only spared. Jedediah Cole leaned heavily on his cane, voice filled with warning, "The law will come asking why their star lies dead." Martha Langley looked toward the fallen badge, whispering, "They'll see the truth, or they'll bury us with him." The townsfolk lowered their eyes, unsure whether freedom had been won or borrowed. Thomas Granger's stare remained fixed on the broken star, as though the devil's laughter still echoed inside it. Thomas Granger stepped outside into the cool desert night, smoke trailing behind him. The crowd followed, lanterns glowing against the darkness. Samuel Price walked close, whispering, "Where do we go now?" Jedediah Cole muttered, "The law don't forget its own boy." Martha Langley lingered at the doorway, her voice soft, "Thomas, they'll call you killer no matter the truth." Thomas Granger lifted his revolver skyward before sliding it back into the holster, his vow now broken beyond repair. He said, "I never wanted this, but it was written the moment he wore the star." The desert wind howled like ghosts carrying the weight of judgment. The street stretched empty, the sheriff's horse pawing restlessly at its post, its reins swaying in the breeze. Samuel Price asked softly, "Will you stay, Thomas?" Thomas Granger shook his head. "The vow's broken, and this town will carry the cost." Jedediah Cole's voice rumbled, "You leave, but the legend stays." Martha Langley stepped forward, her eyes filled with regret. "Thomas, forgive me before you go." Thomas Granger looked at her, his expression unreadable, then turned away. The silence between them was louder than any gunshot, sealing a bond forever fractured. The desert stars burned coldly above, witnesses to the breaking of promises. The dawn crept over the desert, painting the sky with crimson light. Thomas Granger stood alone at the edge of town, his silhouette sharp against the horizon. Samuel Price's voice carried faintly behind him, "We'll remember you, Thomas." Jedediah Cole muttered, "He walks with ghosts now." Martha Langley whispered, "And I'll carry the weight of betrayal." Thomas Granger tightened his coat, eyes fixed on the endless desert ahead. He said softly, "The vow's gone, the devil's gone, but the cost remains." With slow steps, he walked into the rising sun, leaving behind the town and the legend he never wanted. The wind swallowed his trail, as though erasing him into myth.